Party People to observation number 3 as we continue on our journey through the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, specifically chapter 11 or book 11. Today we get to what I think is a core principle of like when I transformed into the person that I am today, when I said, tell the truth at all cost. I did not know about Marcus Aurelius. I did not understand, that this was in his book. But it's one of the toughest business lessons that I had to learn. And when my mind got sober, this became very apparent to me. And I'll kind of unpack that for you. Anybody who is struggling with addiction, whether you realize it or not, or if you've accepted it or not yet, I hope this hits home, and I hope this is the reason why you start a sober count on yourself, just to see how things change. So my hope for you in this lesson is that when we talk about being honest and we talk about telling the truth at all costs, some of this shit's going to make sense. It's going to drive some people to some behaviors that they haven't tried in a while. All right, cool. So listen, number 3, realize that many mistakes are a result of ignorance. That's the tough business lesson. Oftentimes people aren't actually they're not trying to wound me. They just don't understand the rules. They don't understand what's important to me. They're acting in their own self-interest, and it happens to be counter to my self-interest. So he says, when a person makes a decision that offends you, Aurelius writes, first consider whether they are right to do this, in the sense that they are acting in a way that is morally acceptable, even if this is against your own self-interest. In that case, do not spend energy complaining about it. Wow. Right? How much time and energy do you spend with your people, your business partners, your wife, your family, complaining about a person, a thing, a moment in time that has held you back or took something away from you, and you built a story in your mind, your heart, and your soul that built evidence that that person was out to get you? That university, they didn't want you there. Right? You were a walk-on, coaches hated me. Right? You were a teacher, they didn't want me there. I went against their their culture. You were working for a laboratory, you were too honest. That's why you got fired. Like, we build stories and we do mental gymnastics so that way we can justify ourselves. And oftentimes we create these enemies. Know this, and he goes on to this. However, if they are behaving in a reprehensible way, consider that their actions to be based on ignorance. So he doesn't go that if they're acting in a reprehensible way and counter to your self-interest, they're an enemy. Do such. He's saying more benefit of the doubt here. Most people are ignorant. They're not malicious. They don't understand. You haven't done a good enough job declaring your position. You haven't told the truth without all costs. So when they do it, give them the benefit of the doubt. You're going to waste a lot of energy protecting, pretending, and posturing when literally submitting will be just a much better, easier ride for you. This is why I bring up the alcoholism and addiction. I was the captain of a very successful business before I realized that drinking a half a bottle of scotch every night was a bad idea. My grandpa is a very friendly drunk. He drinks scotch. My grandmother is a very friendly drunk. She drinks vodka. My aunts and my uncles, my dad, it's our culture. Friends, Romans, countrymen, not everybody gets drunk in Louisiana. So I didn't realize that I was becoming an angry drunk. I was becoming a paranoid drunk. And I would read a business contract while drinking scotch, and all of a sudden, everybody's out to get me. I would rework conversations that happened during the day whenever I was sober in my drunk mind, and I would build a case of how, through the paranoia, I would build a case of how I needed to move against certain people. I'd be doing a business deal with a group of people over drinks at a bar, at a restaurant, out in the streets, wherever we were. And we're negotiating terms of a deal, and I give up way more than I should have given up because I was drinking. And the next morning I sober up, and because I'm a man of my word, I have to continue down that process. It's a very slippery slope when you lose judgment and you're running a business that impacts lives. And your family is life enough. Your spouse and your children are life enough for you to never lose judgment on a business decision that will impact your children and your wife, right? And so building this distrust in your company culture, in your client base, I guarantee you're a salesperson listening to this podcast, you have thought that the office manager at the clinic that you just rolled out hates your guts, is lazy, and doesn't want to see you succeed. You've said to yourself, they hate me because I'm beautiful. You've said to yourself, they hate me because I make more money than them. They're miserable in their own life, and so they're lazy. They don't want to try anything new. You've built a story that prevents you from getting in there and educating them. He says, for this reason, that many of our offenders resent being called unjust, arrogant, or greedy. Aurelius writes, when dealing with your followers, punishment and chastisement should thus be done in an educational way. Let me talk real quick about accountability and a process that creates competence. Ultimately, collision-based sales, the end of it, we are trying to get to commitment and competence. Commitment that they're bought into the process, that they trust the process, and that they become consistently competent in the process, right? Competence is what we're ultimately the game, but you're not going to get there without accountability. And accountability without consequence is just being an asshole. So he says punishment and chastisement should thus be done in an educational way. He's not saying no rod, no staff, no punishment whatsoever. Like that has to be there. But what he's saying is it needs to be done in an educational way. Here's the deal. Your people, if they're ignorant to the process and that offends you, they're not making a mistake because they're an enemy to you. They're making a mistake because they don't understand. They're ignorant. There's a knowledge gap. You as a leader, your job is to close knowledge gaps. As a salesperson, your job is to close a knowledge gap. As a husband, as a father, your job is to close a knowledge gap, right? Right now, my daughter has trouble wiping herself. She's 5 years old. She's got an itchy butt. If I don't do a good job following up with her and closing that knowledge gap, I'm going to constantly be going behind her, wiping her own butt, right? There's a knowledge gap that a salesperson has when they're rolling out new accounts. If I don't close that knowledge gap and educate them, I'm constantly going to be going behind them, closing their accounts. Your children are a great way for you to practice on your employees. That's why we say lead ourselves, lead our families, lead our employees, and lead our communities. This is another principle here. You have an opportunity to become the best educator in the world to yourself by learning Marcus Aurelius and sharing it with people that you care about. You have an amazing opportunity to become the best educator to your family by having patience and realize that they're not out to get you. They just don't know what the hell you want because you haven't told them the truth yet. You have to educate them on that. That means you have to talk to them. You have to show them through action. You have to be tactile, verbal, and written. I think that's a different one. I can't remember that. Literary. We'll go with that. So, moral of the story is, you continue to practice on educating yourself. You continue to practice on educating your family. You'll be able to practice educating your clients. And then this right here now all of a sudden becomes a very easy thing for you to be able to navigate towards. So, educate and coach in private. Praise in public. Last little message for today. When you have a follower, or you have an employee, or you have a coworker, or you have a client, you have a child, you have a spouse that you know is doing something that's counter to where you believe we should be going. If you chastise them in public, you're going to have an argument. You're going to have a fight. Because remember, from previous rules, we got pride, ego, and humility going on. So when you take them and you bring them in private, coach in private, whether that's on email, that's on text message, That's in one-on-ones, right? Praise in public. Same thing. Email, text message, one-on-ones, or group discussions. You have a Zoom with 8 people, and you decide to start coaching on somebody's weaknesses in the middle of that thing, it's going to go sideways in a heartbeat. And it's going to be because of your ignorance, not understanding that you're dealing with now anxiety and fears and pressure and self-esteem and pain and trauma of people looking foolish all the way from whenever they were a child, standing in front of a class, getting made fun of by the teacher because they didn't know what they were doing. So realize you're dealing with a cognitive bias on how people learn, right? So in your company and with your clients, schedule one-on-ones for your follow-ups. Review and hold your process accountable. Make sure that things are written out, they're drawn out. Become the best teacher in the world and realize that every single time something isn't going right in your mind, it's because you personally have not done a good enough job telling the truth about what you want and where you go in their mind.